Okay, we'll start with the 4 great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless fixations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Good evening. It is the 12th of July, Monday night Chan. And today I'm going to be talking. It's a bit of a continuation of the last lecture I gave. It's based on my experience, my practice, after my trip to India. So just a little bit of a recap. I talked about how when I went to India to visit to help my parents out when they both had COVID, there was some tension there, and the tension didn't so much come from worrying about them. It was that part, my practice was all helping so much with, but I was not as much as at ease as I would have liked. My mind was not as clear as I felt it should have been, as a long time practitioner. That's it was quite messed up if you think about it, that as practitioners we have sometimes really high expectations of ourselves, and that could mess us up even if nothing else did. So it was this quandary of like Huinang says, without thinking of good and bad, what mind is it? Well, my mind was still in the good and bad. It was not in the without thinking of good and bad. And that I did not want to be there. So, and this wasn't something I could like force myself out of, because my body was tense, my neck was hurting, my head was hurting. And it wasn't something, I wanted to take a forceful approach to, because it was already a problem with too much, from holding my practice like this instead of like just so. It came from that, so I could see that, and so I was like, well, I could do the chant of Bodhidharma, Damo, and he's like, like that, right? And that's not gonna help me right now. Or I could do the chant of Guan Pusa. And when I realized that what I really needed was Guan Pusa, it was like all of a sudden it was like sitting with her. Not it was it was not so much as like Guan Pusa, please. It wasn't like in front of her asking her for anything at all. It was just sitting like if she's like sitting across from me also meditating kind of a thing. It was like sitting with her. And sitting with her was sitting in the presence of compassion. It was like that gentleness, that patience. I want to show you my Guan Pusa statue. That's her. Okay, so just sitting with her, the gentleness, the patience, the compassion. It was like all of my tension just melted. And so since then, my practice has been very different from the way it used to be. I would say that instead of being wisdom-centric, it has become more compassion-centric, and it's been very beautiful. And I wanted to share, the practice with you, if you will, the practice, and the practice of compassionate presence. I really wanted to share that with you. So that's what today's talk is going to be about: compassionate presence, and sitting with Guan Yin Pusa. And so compassion. If you look at compassion, that word compassion, what does it mean? In Buddhism, we talk about compassion as a wish to for suffering to end, for a wish for beings to be free from suffering. So that's how we define compassion. And if you look at in normal English usage, there's like empathy and sympathy and pity and compassion. All of these words seem very similar, but you could think of empathy, sympathy. You feel sorry for somebody. You feel for them, but it's like you're like at a higher level. Empathy, you're feeling for them. You're feeling what they're feeling. But compassion is like wide in its perspective. Compassion is not only do you feel for them, but you see broader. Your view is broader than, your friend who's suffering. So you can see how they got there. You can see that they're suffering. You feel for them. You see how they got there. And you could kind of see that there's a way out for them. There's a way out of suffering. So Guan Yin Pusa, she's like that. She's like your friend. For me, she was like a friend who was feeling what I was feeling. I was suffering and she could feel the suffering. But then she knew how the suffering came to be, pratitya samutpada, causes and conditions never fail. She knows the cause of suffering, but my suffering was not any the less. For all of her wisdom, it was not any the less. It was not like, why on earth are you suffering, you sentient being? It wasn't that. It was like, you're hurting. And I know you're hurting. I feel for you. And I know how it's come to be that you're hurting. And I know that not only, there's a way out, that it's inevitable. That it's inevitable that, we talk about a vow that the 4 great vows that we just started the class with, right? So we have vowed to practice. We have vowed to help sentient beings with their suffering. And we've also vowed to attain supreme Buddhahood. So just by that power of vows, there is an end in sight. But even if I were a being who had not made those vows, there is still that end to suffering. So Guan Yin Pusa knows that. I may not know about my own Buddha nature, but Guan Yin Pusa does. So sitting with her is sitting with somebody who knows your suffering, who feels your suffering. Your suffering is important to you, and of course it's important to Guan Yin Pusa. But Guan Yin Pusa sees where that suffering comes from. And Guan Yin Pusa knows that that suffering is not really there. But this was so profound for me, that way of being with a relative while being aware of the absolute. So often when we talk about, there's no self, right? I mean, there's no self. There's not a self. It's not about a self. It's not a self. There's not a self. It's not self. Why are you suffering? Why am I suffering when there's not a self? So, suffering is a choice. It is. It is a choice. But when, if you come at it with that perspective, that you're dismissing the suffering of a sentient being. If you did that to a friend, would that be is that going to work with that? So, but we do that to ourselves all the time. So Guan Yin Pusa, the way of being with that suffering is that suffering is real. It's real to you. There's a complete recognition of how you're hurting. But she knows more, so she can stay with your hurt. She can stay with your suffering. And I really needed that. I really needed that compassionate presence. Like not just the compassion, but staying. That ability to stay with suffering, to not discount suffering somehow, to see beyond the suffering, but not by discounting the suffering. So that was so, like I mentioned, it was so soothing. So I have to say that there was this, how can I say, there was the compassion is something that is like moist. It is not dry. Compassion is what moistens wisdom. Without compassion, wisdom can get really, really dry. And it could get, you could cut through that illusion of the self. But can you be compassionate? Can you see through self while being compassionate? So that way of being with a relative was very new to me. It has been very transformational in my practice, because my practice has softened from this experience. So now when I am, when I get stressed, when I, and of course, why on earth am I getting stressed? Why, suffering is optional. There's the self. But now, instead of like, I'm realizing now I had been like pushing that away. So instead of like pushing that away, pushing away suffering, pushing away that illusory self, now I can recognize it. I can say, I'm suffering. There, I'm suffering. And like innumerable sentient beings, I'm suffering. And of course, I want an end to that suffering. Like all sentient beings, I want happiness. And we call that loving kindness, that maitri or metta, that, I wish for true happiness, right? Of course, I wish to be truly happy. And to stay with it, to not say, therefore, I should not be suffering. To not say that, to simply say, I'm suffering. Of course, I want to be truly happy. And true happiness is enlightenment. Let's not use the word enlightenment, is awakening. True happiness is awakening. Of course, I want true happiness. And to simply just to stay with it, just to stay with it. That has been transformational for me in my practice. And I really, I really, we have these the three characteristics of all phenomena. Sometimes we call it the three seals, and we say there's suffering, there's impermanence, and then there's no self. So I feel like until this this stretch of practice, I hadn't really gotten that suffering. I hadn't really gotten to know suffering. And it has been so beautiful. I would never have imagined that it'd be beautiful. It has been so beautiful to get to know suffering. Who'd have thunk it? Honestly, really, it has been beautiful to get to know suffering, because there was that moistness when I could stay with suffering without pushing it away. When I say, I'm suffering. And of course, like all beings, I want true happiness. That has been transformational for me. And to do this in the presence of Guan Yin Pusa has been transformational, because sometimes, we could, there's words and then there is experience, but there's a lot, how when it comes to parenting, they say, oh, as a parent, you may tell your kids all the things that you'd want them to do and learn and be and all of that, but really the biggest lesson is you and how you are, not just what you say. So just like seeing, so the it has been more profound to sit with Guan Yin Pusa rather than just to say, oh, I'm just going to be compassionate when suffering arises. To have Guan Yin Pusa as a, as that example. Oh, that's what it is. That's what it is to sit with the suffering of myself and of other beings. That's that gentleness. I did not have that gentleness before. And it has been amazing. It's been like a balm to a like something, it's been like a balm. It has been like a soothing balm that it has that soothes away your aches and pains. It has been like that compassion, just sitting with that compassion towards the suffering. So Guan Yin Pusa is not going like, hey, how come you're suffering? You don't have to. That's because there's a self there. Guan Yin Pusa is not going that way. Guan Yin Pusa is going, of course, I see that you're suffering, and I hurt for you too. So that, but I can see more than you can see. I see where the suffering comes from, causes and conditions. And I see there's an end to it. There's Buddha nature, your Buddha nature, right? So I see that Suzanne has something to share. Suzanne, go ahead and unmute yourself and share. No? Okay, I have to look at this chat and then share what you just wrote. So to moisten our lives with the experience of suffering is like moistening a sponge so that it works better to help soak up compassionately the suffering of others. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. She agrees, I assume, yeah. I'm sorry, who agrees, Iksha? Iksha, you want to say something? Suzanne? Yeah, Suzanne's agreeing. Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say I have been able to be more compassionate with others than with myself. This has been a transformational in another way that I could be compassionate with myself. And I think this being with suffering, this compassionate presence, I want to talk about the presence as well, the being with suffering and not pushing it away. I have noticed that there's so many small times in my day where I would like not want to be a certain way, like, oh no, I don't want to. And kind of like now I am more like, there it is. I'm like it's it's been it's changed a lot that I'm able to just say, oh, there it is. Hey there, friend. Hey there, suffering. I see ya. I know ya. You know, I don't have to push you away. It's okay. It's been quite different. My practice has I would say has it's actually softened. It has become deeper, um, and it is also um, it's also opened up. It's also opened up. So I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to do a few meditations, like short meditations, and then just like work our way through this. But I first I want to hear from you. What do you think? Would you like to share something about your experience working with suffering? That'd be lovely to hear. Oh, I want to say Liang Shao is here. Um, and before I went to India, uh, he had said, may Guan Yin Pusa, that he was praying for Guan Yin Pusa to be with you. And after I gave that lecture, he reminded me that, look, that's what I wish for you. And indeed, Guan Yin Pusa was with me, and she's been with me. So yeah, if there's something that I would say is like, may Guan Yin Pusa be with all of you. It's been amazing. So I see that. Yeah. And Iksha says, compassion is so important to others and ourselves. Glad that's your topic. And to remember its connection to wisdom. I, for one, definitely needed a reminder. Thank you. Thank you, Iksha. Anybody would like to share their experience, or maybe you're not sharing your experience, maybe you have a comment or a question. If you want to have oh, Suzanne, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that when we have experienced something ourselves, to that extent, we can say we truly understand when someone else is going through it as well, so that they can know that they are truly not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yes. This not, is that being, that a big part of that compassionate presence is also that being with, we need that sometimes. We need somebody to be with us when we are hurting. We need that. And we also need to know that I would say a big part of the comfort that I got was that I make sense to Guan Yin Pusa. I'm not a crazy person. I make sense to Guan Yin Pusa. I am hurting, but she's not rejecting my hurting. She knows how it's come to be, and she's okay with me suffering. And she hurts for me too, but she knows more than I do. In her wisdom, she can see that there's an end to this suffering. But it's not in that, oh, of course there's an end to your suffering. Just get there already. It's not like that. It's not, there's no hurry. Oh my goodness, there's no hurry. There's no like, get enlightened already, my clock is ticking. It's not like that. She has all the time in the world. So, yeah. Anyone else? Something to share? Oh, Louis, go ahead.
Yeah, my neighbor passed away recently, and we were friends, but we weren't really close. However, while she was sick, and a few times I ended up looking after her cat, feeding her cat, not really doing much, but she also had a dog, and her neighbor on the other side was always cared for the dog because their two dogs were together, but the cat I kind of felt a little sorry for, and it has kind of adopted me. And at first, when that happened, I thought, I would think of myself as being a good person and doing this for the cat's sake. And slowly, I realize that it's been really important for me that I'm on my own. I have friends and relatives close by, but I never really thought about how how something like having another sentient being that's really quite independent, but shows sometimes care and compassion toward me. That was a very strange thing, and it has become much more of a two-way street. And I also, when you mention the compassion and Guan Pusa, I always have Guan close by, and I agree. I think that compassion that we have, that we kind of show to other people, is important. That we have compassion for ourselves too. And I think I'm learning this from your talk. That I think that's what you mean when compassion is moist. It's not so dry and academic. It's a kind of a bodily thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's like I'm melting.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Guan Yin Pusa's presence, I was finally able to melt. It was like that. And that melting is still there. And it's yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Sentha,
Yes.
how do you spell Guanyin?
It's Guan and then a space and a Yin.
Thank you.
It's Avalokiteshvara. Is the so it's Gilbert did a lesson on Avalokiteshvara and Guan Yin. So Avalokiteshvara is the male origin of Guan Yin, and then when Avalokiteshvara went to China, became Guan Yin Pusa, female form. Yeah. You're on mute, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Comments? Oh yeah, Lindsay, go ahead.
It's a lovely sharing, Sentha, because I happen to visit one of the fourth Chinese Buddhist sanctuary in China in May, and that sanctuary I visited is what they call where Guan Yin received her enlightenment. And it's a beautiful island, but however, unfortunately, this is China. There's so many population, and it's a long holiday. So literally, I found very little peace, no quietness, and I was literally grumpy all the way. I mean, I make all the effort to fly to the small island and imagine the picture that I'm going to, you know, have some quiet time, sit a lot, spend some time with my lovely Guan Yin. But then it's a different story. So after 2 days, I'm really, oh gosh, I really want to get out there until I visited this. I just sent you the picture because I think you would like to see it.
Yeah.
Until I visited this main temple, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people. And I mean, imagine if I were Guan Yin sitting there every day. There's no certain code of peace at all, but it doesn't bother her. That's my first instinct.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yes.
Exactly. And particularly the statue is 8 meters high. So it's like overlook all of the sentient being. And it's like, yes, I feel how you feel, but I'm still here. The feeling is really strong. The energy is so strong, and I just couldn't help, and I kind of shed my tears. And I think if you want to go experience, really echo you were sharing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert. Hello, can you unmute, Robert?
Hello, everybody. Amitabha. Today's topic kind of reminds me of something I personally experienced. I totally forgot about it. It happened 30 years ago, 1986. I was in my early 30s, and I have a health problem where my sinus allergy is so bad that I have to go have a surgery to go inside the nose, deep into it, all the way to the throat, to remove a gigantic tumor. They call it polyps, but it's like tumor growing inside. The breathing is painful, and then I cannot breathe. So basically, I cannot kiss at all because I will faint if I kiss my wife. So Stanford Hospital, the ENT head of the department called me, "You are the worst case of allergy he ever saw in Stanford University." So, but there's no other way but have to come back every 2 years to cut out that meatball. And the recovering process is very gruesome and very painful. So now that you mentioned it, that incident came back up, I do not know, and I can't remember why and when. I mean, why I end up going to a temple, a Zen temple in nearby a city named San Jose. I think Letty know where it is. And there's an old monk. He's about 82, and then I say, I have this problem, and the old monk say, "Well, just come sit with me." And then he brought me and Mariana to a Guan Yin hall. Now that I remember, it's a Guan Yin hall, and it's just one statue above a wooden table. The height it's about 7 feet tall, and it's a very it is so comforting and pleasant. It is just so comforting to look at it. And then at that time, I remember the feeling of it. So I turned around, and the teacher or the old monk said, "Okay, just sit there." And he asked us to sit, and that one sit ended up to be 3 years of every Monday evening at 6 o'clock, right after work. So I've been sitting in that Guan Hall for 3 years, every Monday afternoon. And he didn't teach much method. He didn't even teach any. Well, he just say one. He only give instruction once. He say, breathe in, breathe out, watch your exhale, and then count sheeps, or count 1 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 1. And then if you lost your count, it's okay. Just go back and count again. He didn't tell us any more method. That was how short the instruction is. It's about 30 seconds. And then since then, I've been sitting there for that weekly for 3 months. 3 years. And after that, first of all, my allergy stops, which is quite impossible. The allergy stopped. And then I never need to see the doctor again, Stanford. The doctor keep calling me. He said, "Are you okay?" He called me just to say that I'm okay. I say, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then he say, "Anything else?" I say, "I think not only I can breathe, air actually go in and go out through my nose. I'm for the first time for at least 10 years, I'm able to smell. I wasn't able to smell anything for almost 10 years. Since from 1976 to 1986, I wasn't able to smell. When I immigrated to this country, I guess it's pollen everywhere. I wasn't used to it. And my system just blew up. And sitting after for 3 years, everything's starting to recover. And of course, I continue to sit at home. And then the smelling sensation comes back stronger and stronger, to a point that I can smell. It becomes so sensitive. I can smell so many things. And my family now say, "Robert, you're terrible. You smell anything." Which is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. When someone at the end of my neighborhood smoking pot, and someone walk by, I can smell it, where he is about probably 100 feet away. Mm-hmm. When any funny animal walk by, I can smell it. And so I think at that time, I didn't know the appreciation of because Guan Yin Pusa was standing right behind me. I was sitting with my back against him, and I didn't know Guan Yin Pusa was. Now that I know why and what happened, now that you mentioned today, it is literally impossible, according to the Stanford hospital, that I have this. And since then, 1986 till now, which is about another 30 years, I never have any allergy. I never have the sinus polyps. I never have any reaction. And I'm able to smell every different fruit, or every different red wine or white wine. When I put a glass to my nose, I smell so many fragrant from a red wine or white wine, or even a soda pop, or even a tortilla chip, anything. And I think it's such a blessing that Guan Yin Pusa has helped me. And I think maybe it is a testimony that I owe so much of my recovery to Guan Yin Pusa. Yeah, but I guess that's the story of my personal experience.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else like to share anything? No? All right. Okay. So where did I get my Guan Yin Pusa Liang show? Asked, and I think I got it in the Zen Mountain Monastery store, maybe something like that. I'll send you that information, Liang Show. All right. Okay, so let's do a few short meditations. The first one we are going to do is to simply, a moment. All right. Okay, so to simply notice our breath, it'll be like maybe like 3-5 minutes, something like that. I just want to kind of introduce just that compassionate presence. So just notice your breath. Wherever in your body you feel it the most. And notice if it is fast, slow, shallow, deep. What is it like? And no matter what it's like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be anything other than what it is right now. And especially, if you wish it were deeper, if you wish it were slower, it's okay to wish, but it's also okay for it to be just the way it is. Just staying with your breath. Noticing that it's changing all the time. And one breath is never like another. And noticing your breath and how it has just come to be through causes and conditions. Whatever your day was like, that's reflected in this breath. And there's nothing wrong with the way it is because it has come to be in an impeccable way through causes and conditions. If this breath is wrong, the previous breath would have been wrong. And on backwards until that beginningless first cause. And that's not true. So this breath is okay, however it is. If you were sitting right next to Guan Yin Pusa, your knee touching her knee, this breath would be completely okay. To her, it would be. And if you were sitting right next to Guan Yin Pusa, the suffering that you didn't know you were experiencing would become apparent. Because there's someone who's hearing, who's willing to listen. And in her presence, you find that you could be with your suffering as well. That this sentient being suffering is still important. This sentient being is not a self, is not an entity, but still the suffering of this sentient being is still important. And in Guan Yin Pusa's presence, it's like the suffering can come up and get aired out, and experience impermanence. Come up and go. And as this happens, for as long as it takes, Guan Yin Pusa's patience has no limit. Your suffering can come up, get aired out, and go away. And another wave of suffering could come up, get aired out, and go away. It's almost like the waves of the ocean that Guan Yin Pusa listened to when she attained liberation. Your waves of suffering are just that way. And Guan Yin Pusa is listening still. And as your suffering comes up and goes away, there starts to be a feeling of peace. peace that is moistened with compassion. There's peace. Maybe there may not be any suffering now, but it would be okay if suffering were to arise. And like Guan Yin Pusa, you're listening too. You find that you can listen for suffering, just like Guan Yin Pusa. Your ears are attuned to suffering. And you can do this because suffering is impermanent. You know it comes up. You know it abides, and you know it passes away. And you know that you are not the suffering self. That suffering self is not no self. So you can be for that suffering self. For that self to arise, abide, and go away. And as you do this, you realize that all of this is happening somewhere where that suffering arises, abides, and goes away. Where the suffering self arises, abides, and goes away. And you can stay with that compassionate presence of Guan Yin Pusa. That is mind itself. I hope you got a little glimpse of compassionate presence of sitting with Guan Yin Pusa. Would anybody like to comment? Robert, did you have your hand up or is it from before? Okay. Anybody wants to comment? How was that for you? Good. All right. Okay, so I am finding that I wanted to do another with the body sensation, but I wanted to do a separate one on breath and body sensations. But I think that was that's, I would say that that's about all the meditation I want to lead today. It's turned out a little deeper than I anticipated, because I thought I'd do something shorter than that. But if anybody has any comments, questions, the floor is open. Thank you, Chris. Comments, questions, anybody? Nope. All right. Thank you so much for coming to class today. And thank you for everybody who shared. Thank you so much. Join palms and bow.
Thank you, Sentha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sentha.
Thank you, Santa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sentha. Wonderful meditation. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.